I stood in the launch cradle with my boots locked to the carbon ceramic ramp, visor down, hearing nothing but the slow heartbeat hiss of my suit's coolant pumps. Above me, hidden behind layers of composite shielding, the assault frigate Sol's Promise slashed through low orbit, shedding sparks of ionized dust as it kissed the upper arc of Ember World Alpha's atmosphere. Below, somewhere in the boiling haze, lay 500 kilometers of enemy entrenchments. The scarred earthworks of the sky. I had studied holos of those trenches for months, jagged mazes, labyrinths of railgun nests and liquid fire moats, each segment connected by fortified bunkers that tunneled so deep you could hide a starship in the dark. Our generals had said no conventional infantry charge could break them. Tanks melted, drones fell, artillery only rearranged the rubble. So command had reached for something new, something no battlefield doctrine had a counter for. The Photonic Cavalry. When the program opened its recruiting doors, they did not look for the biggest or the strongest. They wanted balance artists who could step from girder to girder on crumbling space scaffolds. Amateurs who'd ridden solar sail edges for fun. Disgraced fighter jockeys with insane reaction times. Dancers from the orbital palaces who had never held a rifle in their lives. They wanted people who could make a decision every tenth of a millisecond and live with it. I was a dropout from the Lagrange free fall ballet, a failed prospect who'd washed out after breaking a partner's collarbone during an uncontrolled spin. On a whim, I took the Cavalry's aptitude sim, scored in the 99th percentile, and 3 weeks later I was strapped into the first prototype spectrosaddle, hurtling down a test beam over Luna. We learned to ride light like old Earth dragoons once rode horses, except our mounts never tired and never forgave. One twitch of the suit's field anchors, and you veered 10 clicks off target. A microsecond's hesitation, and you overshot the landing zone by a continent. Half the original trainees washed out when their nerves locked and the harness tore ligaments from bone. Another quarter drifted into upper orbit, burnt out control modules, dead forever among cold auroras. Those of us who remained became something else, part human, part lasers. Soldiers who could drop from vacuum to dirt in the blink of a startled eye. Now, the glow paint numerals hovering in my HUD hit 0. The hatch above the cradle irised wide, revealing the midday blaze of Ember World Alpha as a flattened blood orange lens. Command frequencies crackled. Cavalry Wave 1, mounts are live. Good hunting. A tremor of silver heat ran through my bones, the beam generator charging. We called that tremor the whinny. It was the light itself getting restless, stamping against its microwave corral. I leaned forward, palms sliding along the stabilizer grips, and felt the soft click of the anchoring magnets as they released. Gravity surrendered at once. For one breathless instant, I was a freeling again, weightless as rehearsals in the ballet dome, my limbs describing arcs they remembered from years ago. Then the beams spat me out. Acceleration slammed every cell of my body into the backing gel, yet the suit's metamaterial frame folded the G-forces away, leaving only the sensation of wind becoming stone. I rocketed along a column of coherent photons wider than a subway tunnel, the air around me flashing to plasma where the beam's edges leaked. Below, the clouds of Ember World Alpha opened like wet paper. Static lightning flickered inside them in ultraviolet tongues that wrote curse words across the sky. I could see the battlefield in absurd, top-down clarity, the enemy trench networks glowing infrared from residual bombardment heat, the automated turrets swiveling mindlessly at flickers they could not yet comprehend, the data-plinked markers of my fellow riders descending on parallel shafts of living brightness. To my right, Sergeant Keita's beams speared through a troop transport mid-slight, slicing the Duraloid carrier into 6 molten facets. To my left, Corporal Rios's route intersected a ridge, the beam gouging a canyon so deep magma spat upward like surprised geysers. Our approach alone was already rewriting the topography. I crossed terminal altitude at Mach 14. Sensors shouted that my velocity relative to ground targets was still lethal, but I began the flare phase anyway, twisting my torso 90 degrees while my boots kicked out into a split position, an old ballet move repurposed for war. The suit's gravity lensing plates reoriented, bleeding speed sideways into a spiral plume. At 200 meters, I disengaged the primary beam lock. The mount vanished. Momentum hurled me forward across a sky littered with darting artillery smoke. I drew my Argonage saber, thumbed it live. The blade shimmered. An ionic filament strung inside a hollow, transparent, monomolecular shell, half plasma, half razor. Somewhere in the training manuals, this combination of maneuvers had a cold designation. Approach vector Delta 12, close combat option 3. To us, it was simply the mercy kill waltz. I landed feet first on the lid of a bunker node, a 3-meter slab of diamantine armor. My saber carved an entry slot before the impact shock even registered. I dropped through the cut as the slab sagged behind me, molten. Inside, panic detonated. Enemy soldiers, the Cavalry rumored to be half machine, half fungal colony. I never saw anything but armor plates braided with root-like cabling, faces hidden under black mycelium mesh. They screamed in pulses of ultrasonic clicks that rattled in my teeth. I answered with choreographed slaughter, a pivot, a sweeping low strike, an overhead decapitation. Within 16 seconds, I had cleared the chamber and keyed my comm. "Node echo neutralized," I reported, voice calm as though filing a forms requisition, though sweat already flooded the suit's recirc filters. Thunder shook the bunker. Above me, Kata's beam had scythed another trench line, trench sections sliding apart as tidy as cake slices. Rios was singing over the squad channel again. He always sang under stress. Some antique ballad about rowdy sailors, the lyrics spliced with coordinates. I leapt back onto the surface through my own smoking aperture. Ember World Alpha's wind hit my visor, a furnace gale laden with iron dust. 50 meters downslope, a railgun nest homed on my silhouette. Mag-accelerated slugs hissed past, leaving contrails of vaporized air. One grazed my hip seal. A red breach icon splashed the HUD, but the suit's self-weave closed it before depressurization threatened. I had no ranged weapon. Cavalry doctrine insisted sabers only. You fought at the speed of light or blade. Nothing in between. So I broke into an upspringing vault, feet touching a shattered parapet, then the scorched husk of a fallen shuttle bounding closer like a trick of persistence, a vision. When I reached the nest, the crew had barely realigned. I disarmed the cradle gun with a single downward slash that parted its coil stack. The return arc licked into the turret's titanium bones and fused them shut. The scour operator tried to retreat, but I spun, kicked, drove the saber through armor and whatever counted as heart. His collapse made no more sound than dropping fruit into mud. Cavalry units consolidated. Grid 9, command ordered. Infantry transports inbound to exploit breach. Grid 9 was a collapsed segment where subterranean tunnels undercut the surface trenches. Getting there meant crossing a no-man's land of still cratering artillery. Alpha Corps commanded overlap. Still, Sub-Corps was prevailing. I oriented east. Above me, the spear beams were switching off, their duty cycle cooling the main arrays. Some riders remained aloft on standby, ready to re-inject if AA concentrations thickened, but most of us were dirt side now, transiting between objectives. I sprinted, every stride leveraging the suit's gravimetric flex. Rios joined me, humming louder. His saber was nicknamed Habanero, because he'd painted the hilt bright pepper red. We found open ground at the lip of a crater. Beyond, the trench inner circuit writhed with scour reserves streaming into line, their armor fracturing under poor coordination. "Commander wants shock," Rios said, tapping helmet to mine. "Shall we give them choreography?" I laughed, a harsh rasp inside the mic. "Choose the piece." He started humming the Imperial anthem. I countered with a riff from Swan Lake. Seconds later, we launched down the slope, sabers leaving twin arcs of white like contrails of miniature suns. The scour saw 2 targets and tried to create overlapping fields of fire, but we weren't targets. We were problems expressed at relativistic speeds. Each time a slug or pulse laser neared, we weren't there anymore. We were to the left, the right, above. Rios cartwheeled off an emplacement shield, inverted midair, came down heels first onto a heavy gunner, crushing exoskeletal plates. I twisted between 2 plasma bursts, let them pass, then drove forward through the gap they'd burned in the dust cloud. In less than a minute, we had converted what was to be a defensive bulwark into a mass grave. The air tasted of ozone and fungus rot. I knelt amid a ruin, scanning. Static flooded my comms. Jamming nodes somewhere below were singing. Deeper tunnels had to be close, guiding more reinforcements to the breach. That's when the earth bucked, as though an angry animal shook off fleas. Chunks of basalt exploded 10 meters high. From the fissures rose a new echelon of scour, towering frames of chitinous alloy carrying corona cannons that vomited magnetic storms. One storm clipped a rider named Ho, instantly folding her suit into a bead of superheated waste. That was new. Our sabers could deflect kinetic rounds and disrupt energy beams, but magneto-gravitic shear? That tore at the same space-time curvature we manipulated. The enemy had learned. "Photonic units fall back to designated," someone suggested. "Negative," Major Linton cut in, voice iron. He commanded from orbit, watching everything through our suit cams. "Hold the gap." Reinforcements 5 minutes out. 5 minutes was a lifetime in Light Rider terms. Kita answered before anyone else. "Copy. Holding." In that instant, I felt it again. The raw kernel of why we'd volunteered. We had trained to treat the beam like a partner in dance. When it dipped, we rose. When it sped, we unfolded to match the tempo. Now the partner was on break. We alone would decide the choreography. "Kaida, Rios, flank right," I ordered, even though Kaida outranked me. He grunted assent. "I'll draw front, sabers only, no big gestures, watch the corona arcs." I advanced, chest vibrating with power pack hum. The first scour behemoth arced a magnetic vortex at me. I watched micro-singularities flicker inside the cone, ready to rip electrons from their shells. I dove forward into a split, hitting the ground on my forearms so hard I felt bone bruise. The storm roared overhead, shredding a column of air into prismatic shards. I kicked up into a handstand, pivoted on my gauntlets, sliced at the creature's legs. Sparks erupted where my blade sheared through armored joints. The behemoth toppled, but its torso detached on thrumming gyros to stay upright. Before it could stabilize, Kata's streak slid underneath and bisected it horizontally, leaving twin halves to splay apart like a cracking seed pod. Rios vaulted off the wreck to impale a second behemoth square between ocular clusters, then sprung clear as corona discharge spat wild. We whittled them down, 17, 18 giants each requiring a different improvisation. My left shoulder numbed from recoil. Saber battery flagged yellow, flirting with red. Still no infantry, no aerodrones. Only the 3 of us against a curtain of impossible weapons. I risked a glance skyward. The orbital beams, recharged, were reorienting, but command would not fire until organic forces pulled clear. The beams carved indiscriminately. We were too entangled. We needed separation. "Rios," I called, "can you paint me a channel?" "Con una chispa," he said, with a spark. He flicked his saber in a wide arc that sprayed ionized gas, marking a shimmering trail. I sprinted along the flicker path, saber retracted, both hands free to juggle microcharge grenade. My objective, the jamming node, hidden inside the most fortified bunker cluster, preventing our support from coordinating. I threw the grenades ahead in a timing pattern, first to detonate right, second high left, third dead center. Their EMP blossoms made the night inside my visor flicker. Amid the chaos, I dove into a roof vent. A shaft dropped 20 meters. At the bottom, unexpected quiet. A clean corridor lined by pulsing biofiber conduits carrying data to the node. I could feel encryption packets flying past my skin like ghost rain. The core chamber door was an iris of living metal that read thoughts to grant access. I stabbed it. The saber bit, the metal screamed, the iris slumped open. Inside waited no soldiers, only a massive fungal brain extruded from the floor, its cap riddled with crystal shards. A spore computer. The thing twitched, sensing threat, extruding polyps that discharged electric cause. I hesitated, not from fear but from a sudden scientist's curiosity. We were taught the Scour were hive minds, each node part of a planet spanning consciousness. Killing this brain might not just end local comms, it could lobotomize every soldier within kilometers. Could we exploit that? No time. A polyp shot a bolt that scorched my thigh plating. I advanced, swung, carved downward through the cap. The spore computer exhaled a cloud of glittering dust. My suit filtered automatically, but the spores reached the bioports and swarmed the outer seals. Sensor icons blinked orange. Infiltration attempt. I shut down every external interface except vital ones, isolating the intrusion. My audiols flooded with whisper clicks. The node trying to bargain, or curse. I plunged the saber again. This time, I held it there until the core collapsed into gloopy ash. Silence rushed in. Above ground, the jamming field died, my comm filled with overlapping voices. Distant thunder, orbital artillery. No, the support ships had begun atmospheric insertion, bringing conventional armor to reinforce. "No down," I said, climbing out through the vent shaft as tremors shook dust loose. "Cavalry pulling clear. Light us a path, command." "Confirmed," Major Linton replied. "Beam strike inbound. 30 seconds." I sprinted, lungs raw, chasing Rios's ion trail back toward open air. Keita ran parallel. One arm limb magnet shear had crushed his bicep actuator. "Go," he urged, refusing help. We burst into daylight. The behemoth survivors lumbered after us, but slowed by ruined servos. We were perhaps 100 meters from safe distance. The orbital geometry lines in my HUD counted down. 20 seconds. "Keita, your thrusters?" I asked. "Gone." Rios and I locked gazes through tinted plex. We didn't need words. We turned back for him, each grabbing one arm. Our grab plates juiced to overload despite protests from exoskeleton joints. We hauled him forward. The countdown hit 5, 4. We leaped, skittering across broken trench walls. 2. At 1. An unfamiliar hush swept the battlefield. Photons in their pre-birth hush, the calm before a note, and the sky cracked white. Beams pillar-dropped, not thin lances like our mounts, but cathedral-wide wedges of excised sun. Everything behind us evaporated. Behemoths, trenches, the spore computer tunnels I had just crawled through, even significant fractions of the hillside itself now reduced to glassy slag. The concussion outraced the thunder. We tumbled, bounced, slid until frictions surrendered to inertia. When we stopped, my readout said we were 2 clicks outside the kill ellipse. Safe, by someone's definition. Med drones buzzed over tardy, fussing with sealants and bone scan beams. Keita refused a stretcher. Rios tried to light a victory cigarette, only to find the flames snuffed by sterile breeze. I lay on my back and watched the sky, expecting relief, but a slow dread seeped instead. We had just erased landscape, life, data, the sum memory of this valley replaced by fused glass. Brilliant as it was, Photonic Cavalry was ultimately a hammer, and we swung it because we could not imagine any softer method of persuasion. High above, the Soul's Promise continued its orbit, beams cooling, ready for another pass. Infantry dropships lowered like seeds to the smoldering crust, their dark bellies disgorging troops who cheered us as heroes. But I saw what they could not: the scorch marks on Keita's armor, the hairline fissures in Rios's saber, the corrosion spores still eating microscopic pocks across my thigh plate, despite quarantine code. The Scour had adapted once already. They would again. Light may travel the fastest, but shadows breed everywhere it has not yet reached. That night we bivouacked inside a shell of melted rock, the desert wind howling over vitrified dunes, I dreamed of the beam's song, the whinny. Only now it carried a counter-melody, faint, fungal, patient. When I woke, First Watch reported seismic fluttering under the glass plane, as though roots sought purchase in scorched soil. Humanity had fielded its first photonic cavalry and, for a moment, ridden glory straight down the throat of hell. Yet I could not decide whether I felt more like a pioneer or a herald draped in borrowed light, blasting trumpets toward an enemy that might soon answer in unimaginable harmonies. The dawn broke lavender over Ember World Alpha, rays bending through upper Atmos haze. I stood, stretched, aching muscles, checked saber charge levels. They were green. Above, in orbit, the generators warmed, preparing new beams. The dance was far from over, and I, once a failed dancer, had at last found a stage wide enough to challenge my steps.